Not all murders are born of money or power. Sometimes a few words are enough to turn a grudge into deadly revenge. My name is Liam King. I'm 35 years old, and for 12 of those years, I've been a detective with the Billings, Montana Police Department. The morning of October 27th began with a phone call at 7:30. Duty Sergeant Thompson's voice sounded strained. "Detective King, we have a dead body outside a university dormitory." Young girl, it's not a pretty picture. Unpleasant. I was already pulling on my jacket when he added, "The body's badly mutilated. We may need forensic help to identify it." The drive to the university campus took 20 minutes. The fall fog was just beginning to clear when I parked near the yellow tape fencing the crime scene. The ditch ran along the sidewalk connecting the main building to the dormitory for second and third year students. It was usually crowded, with students constantly sniffing between the buildings, but now the area was empty except for the police and CSI. Officer Davis handed me latex gloves and nodded toward the ditch. The body was discovered by a female student around 6 in the morning while going for a jog. The girl's in shock, so they sent her to the nurse's station. I cautiously walked down to the edge of the ditch and crouched next to the body. What I saw made even me, who had seen a lot of cruelty during my years of service, clench my teeth. The body of a young girl lay face down in the muddy water. Her clothes were torn, her hair was tangled, and her face was disfigured beyond recognition. Multiple blows had turned the features into a bloody mass. "Any ID on her?" I asked CSI Johnson. "Student ID was found in her jeans pocket. Carly Simmons, 19, sophomore accounting major." I wrote the name down in my notebook and took another close look at the scene. There were no signs of a struggle around the ditch. Either the murder had taken place elsewhere, or the attack had been so sudden that the victim hadn't had time to fight back. The condition of the body suggested that death had occurred several hours ago, most likely during the night. "Did anyone call the parents?" I asked. "Not yet, they were waiting for you." Good. I need to talk to my roommate first, and have the body sent to the morgue for an autopsy. The dorm was a 4-story brick building dating back to the 60s. Carly's room was on the 2nd floor. I walked up the stairs, which smelled of old paint and cheap carpeting, and knocked on door number 207. The door was opened by a young girl with tear-stained eyes. She was dressed in sweatpants and a faded t-shirt, her hair gathered into a sloppy ponytail. "Jennifer Watson?" I clarified, showing my ID. "Detective King, I need to ask you some questions about Carly Simmons." Jennifer nodded and invited me into the room. The room was divided in half, each half matching the tastes of its occupant. The left side was neat and minimalist. The right side was cluttered with textbooks, makeup, and clothes. "Carly was she really dead?" Jennifer asked, sitting down on her bed. "Unfortunately, yes. When was the last time you saw Carly?" Jennifer wiped her eyes with the sleeve of her t-shirt. "Last night, around 9 o'clock. She said she was going to the library to finish her economics paper. I went to bed early, studying for my anatomy exam. I woke up this morning and her bed was untouched. Tell me about Carly. What was she like? Did she have any enemies, any problems with anyone?" Jennifer hesitated, nervously rubbing the edge of her pillowcase. Carly was complicated. Very smart, but sometimes abrupt. She didn't put up with stupidity and could be pretty harsh with her words, especially with guys who tried to court her. "Anyone in particular come to mind?" "Henry Rodriguez. He's a year older than us, studying computer technology. He's been hanging around Carly the last few weeks, bringing her coffee, offering to help her study. And yesterday..." Jennifer stopped talking, clearly hesitating. "What happened yesterday?" "Yesterday afternoon, in the cafeteria, in front of all the students, he told her he loved her. He stood in the middle of the room and started telling her how beautiful and smart she was, that he wanted to be with her. Carly. She laughed in his face and told him in front of everyone that he wasn't worthy of her, that she would never date a loser like that. Henry stood there red as a cancer, and everyone around him laughed. I wrote down every word. Public humiliation is a strong motive for revenge, especially for a young man with a damaged ego. How did Henry react? He just walked away. But the look on his face, scary. I'd never seen such hatred in his eyes. "Did you tell anyone that Carly didn't come home last night?" "No. Sometimes she'd stay at the library till closing time and then go to a friend's house. I figured that's what she did this time. Where can I find Henry Rodriguez? He lives in the men's dormitory, building A, third floor, I think. Room 312 or 314, I don't remember exactly. I thanked Jennifer for the information and asked her not to go anywhere in case I needed more questions. As I walked down the stairs, I was already mentally mapping out a plan to interrogate Henry Rodriguez. The men's dormitory was across the street from the women's dormitory. Building A was like its neighbor, brick and shabby. Room 312 was locked, but at 313, a sleepy guy in boxers opened the door. "Henry Rodriguez? He's in 314, he mumbled, and slammed the door shut. I knocked on the door. A few seconds later it opened, and I saw the dark face of a young man in his 20s. He was of average height, thin, and wore thick-lensed glasses. He was wearing a crumpled t-shirt and jeans. "Henry Rodriguez? Yeah, that's me. What's up? I showed my ID, Detective King. I need to talk to you about Carly Simmons." Henry's face changed instantly. Whereas before he'd just looked sleepy and irritated, now there was fear in his eyes. What about Carly? Can I come in?" Henry reluctantly stepped aside, letting me into the room. The room was small but neat. The desk had 2 monitors, a keyboard, and a lot of technical books. There were posters of superheroes and scenes from science fiction movies hanging on the walls. "Carly Simmons was found dead this morning," I said, watching Henry's reaction carefully. He sank to the edge of the bed as if his legs were no longer holding him up. "Dead? But how? What happened?" "It's still under investigation. I'd like to ask you a few questions. I'm aware of the incident in the cafeteria yesterday." Henry clenched his fists and lowered his head. "It was horrible. She humiliated me in front of everyone, but I would never hurt her. Tell me what happened after you left the cafeteria." I came here to my room. I locked myself in and didn't come out until morning. I was shocked by what she said. "Can anyone confirm that you were here all night?" Henry hesitated, rubbing his forehead. "My roommate went home for the weekend, but I really was here. I played online games until late. You can check the logs." "What time did you go to bed?" "Around 3 in the morning, maybe later." "And between 9 p.m. and 3 a.m., did you leave the room?" "No, I didn't. Look, I know I look suspicious after what happened in the cafeteria, but I'm not a murderer. Yes, I was angry at Carly. She made me the laughingstock of the entire university, but to kill her? That's insane." I looked at Henry, trying to gauge his sincerity. He looked scared and worried, but that could be a sign of innocence as well as good acting. "Describe your relationship with Carly before yesterday." "We didn't have a relationship." Henry smiled bitterly. I'd been in love with her since freshman year. She was so beautiful, so smart. I thought if I was persistent enough, if I showed her that I was serious about her, then maybe... "How long did you try to get her attention?" "A few months. I helped her with her computer, brought her coffee, offered to help her study. She's always been polite, but cold. And then yesterday I decided it was time to come clean. And I got what I got. What I got." "Were you angry with her?" Henry was silent for a long time, staring at the floor. "Yes, I was. Very angry. She could have turned me down in private, but why make such a circus of it? Why say I wasn't worthy of her? But anger is not the same as murder." I stood up, pulling out my business card. "Mr. Rodriguez, are you planning on going anywhere in the next few days?" "And no, of course not." Okay. If you remember anything else about last night or Carly, call me, and we'll check your alibi, including your gambling activities." Henry nodded, walking me to the door. His hands shook as he closed the door behind me. As I left the dorm, I stopped on the sidewalk and took another look at the crime scene. The ditch was clearly visible from the windows of the dormitory. If the murder really happened here, someone could have seen it. So far, I had one prime suspect, Henry Rodriguez. The motive was obvious: public humiliation that could drive a young man with a damaged psyche to extremes. But the alibi had yet to be verified, and many questions remained unanswered. Why was the body so mutilated? Was it a murder of passion or cold-bloodedly planned revenge? And most importantly, had Henry Rodriguez really been in his room all night as he claimed? I headed to the car, mentally making a list of priorities. I needed to check the security cameras. talk to other students who might have seen Carly last night, and get the autopsy results. But first came the hardest conversation of all, with Carly's parents. The case was just getting started, and I could already sense that something more complicated was lurking behind the simplicity. Passionate killings don't usually involve such brutality to the body after death. Carly Simmons had been turned into an unrecognizable mess, and I wanted to understand why. The next day, October 28th, I received a call that completely changed the direction of the investigation. It was about 10 o'clock in the morning, and I was reviewing the university's security footage when the phone rang. "Detective King, this is Robert Simmons, Carly's father. I need to speak to you urgently. I received a letter." The man's voice sounded strained with barely contained anxiety. "What letter, Mr. Simmons?" "You'd better see for yourself. Can you come to my office? It's about my daughter's death." Robert Simmons gave me an address downtown. I put the videotapes aside, and half an hour later, I was taking the elevator to an office building on Montana Avenue. The sign on the door read, "Simmons Logistics, reliable trucking across America." Robert Simmons met me in the reception area. He was a tall man of about 48, with a streak in his short-cropped hair and tired eyes. He was wearing an expensive dark gray suit, but he looked like he'd been up all night. "Detective King, thank you for coming. Step into my office." The office was spacious and functional. Solid oak desk, leather chairs, a map of the United States on the wall with delivery routes marked. A white envelope lay on the desk. "Sit down, please." Robert pointed to the chair across from the desk. "Yesterday, after you called and told me about Carly, I couldn't think about anything. And this morning the secretary brought me the mail. Among the correspondence was this envelope." Robert took the envelope and handed it to me. It had the office address printed on it, no return address. The postmark was Chicago, Illinois, and the date was October 26th. I carefully removed a piece of paper from the envelope. The message was printed on a regular laser printer. "Your daughter has paid the price for your greed. If you don't stop your business in Chicago within a week, your wife will be next." "When did this come?" I asked, scrutinizing the letter. "This morning with the regular mail." "Detective, could this be related to Carly's death?" "Very possibly. Tell me about your business in Chicago. When did you start there? Who are your competitors?" Robert leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. "My company has been in the logistics business for 15 years. We specialize in moving industrial freight throughout the western states. Our main customers are factories, construction companies, mining companies. Business is good. We have about 120 trucks and 250 employees. And Chicago? I decided to expand east 6 months ago. Chicago is a big industrial center. Lots of potential customers. We opened a branch in August, rented a warehouse, hired a local team." Robert stood up and walked over to the map on the wall, pointing to the marked dots. "In the last 2 months, we've signed contracts with 3 large factories and 2 construction companies. The total is about $8 million a year." "That's a lot of money. Who have you been squeezing?" Mostly Vindai Logistics. They've been in Chicago for 20 years, control most of the market. We offered our customers lower rates and better service. Some of the big contracts went to us." "How did Vindai Logistics react?" Robert walked back to his desk and sank heavily into his chair. "Not very friendly. Their president, Marcus Johnston, called me several times. First, he offered me a gentleman's agreement to split the market. When I refused, he threatened a price war and lawsuits." "Lawsuits?" "They accused us of dumping and unfair competition. Nothing serious, just the usual pressure tactics. But Johnston's a tough man. In business, he's considered ruthless." I wrote down every detail in my notebook. "Who else would be unhappy with your appearance in Chicago?" "Great Lakes Transportation, another big company. Their vice president, David Hughes, also expressed displeasure, and several smaller players who lost customers." "Mr. Simmons, tell me honestly, could your competitors have gone in for the kill?" Robert was silent for a long time, staring out the window. "Before, I would have said no, but after this letter, there's a lot of money and fierce competition in the logistics business. There are companies that use less than legal methods, bribing officials, intimidating competitors, but killing your daughter for a business conflict? The letter says your daughter paid for your greed. That sounds exactly like revenge." Yeah, that's what I thought too. Detective, what do I do? They're threatening to kill my wife. First of all, we're going to arrange security for your family. Second, I want all the information I can get on your Chicago competitors. Contracts you've taken out, correspondence, phone records, everything. Of course, anything you need. Also, did Carly know about your business in Chicago? Could she have run into someone from there? Robert shook his head. Carly wasn't interested in business. She was focused on her studies, planning to become an accountant. We rarely talked about work. But did she know about the expansion in Chicago? She might have. I might have mentioned at dinner that we were opening a new branch. But she didn't know the details. After talking to Robert Simmons, I came back to the station with a whole new understanding. The letter from Chicago changed the situation dramatically. If Carly's murder had been an act of revenge by her father's business rivals, Henry Rodriguez's motive seemed less compelling. I sat down at my computer and began gathering information on Vindai Logistics and Marcus Johnston. The company was founded in 2004, had annual sales of about $50 million, and a reputation for aggressive market penetration. Marcus Johnston, 54 years old, had previously worked in the security industry and had connections in various circles in Chicago. Great Lakes Transportation was even larger, $70 million a year, founded in the 90s. David Hughes, 46, ex-military, specialized in industrial transportation. I called Detective Michael Davis of the Chicago Police Department, with whom I'd worked an interstate case a few years ago. Mike, this is Liam King from Montana. I need information on 2 logistics companies in your city. A half hour later, Mike called back. Liam, interesting business. Vindai Logistics was on the FBI's radar for suspected money laundering, but no evidence was found. Johnston's clean on paper, but rumors of organized crime. Great Lakes is more civilized, but Hughes is known for his tough business practices. Could they have gone on a killing spree over a business conflict? It's hard to say. There's a lot of dirt in Chicago's logistics business. If someone's seriously threatening the big money. Thanks, Mike. If you hear anything else, call me. I leaned back in my chair, analyzing the new information. On the one hand, I had Henry Rodriguez with an obvious motive, public humiliation. On the other hand, the letter from Chicago pointed to professional revenge involving a multi-million-dollar business. Carly's murder may have been a message to Robert Simmons. This is what happens to your family if you don't get off our property. The brutality with which the body was mutilated could have been a way to increase the psychological impact. I called the lab to get the autopsy results. Detective King? Dr. Miller finished the autopsy on Carly Simmons. Death was caused by multiple blunt force trauma to the head. Time of death was sometime between 11 p.m. and 1 a.m. No signs of rape on the body. Most of the injuries were inflicted post-mortem. Murder weapon? Probably a metal pipe or a hammer. Something heavy with a relatively small impact area. This information got me thinking. If the murder was done by professionals from Chicago, why didn't they use firearms? Why such brutality after death? It was more like a crime of passion. But the letter was sent from Chicago on October 26th, the day of the murder. Someone knew in advance what was going to happen and prepared the message. But I still had my doubts. The letter from Chicago was too convenient. It came just as I was beginning to suspect Henry. And the very tone of the letter, "Your daughter paid for your greed," sounded almost like a cliché from a crime movie. On the other hand, Robert Simmons's business in Chicago was real, and so were the competitors. $8 million a year was a serious amount of money to kill for. By the end of the day, I had compiled dossiers on the main suspects from Chicago. Marcus Johnston had a reputation for stopping at nothing to protect his interests. David Hughes was known for his tough methods of dealing with competitors. Both had the resources and connections to organize the assassination. But something was bothering me. Professional hitmen usually work cleanly, one shot, no trace. Carly, on the other hand, was beaten to death with extreme brutality. That doesn't sound like the work of a hitman. I called Robert Simmons. Mr. Simmons, I want you to contact your people in Chicago. Find out everything you can about the reaction of Vindai Logistics and Great Lakes Transportation to your expansion. Especially interested in threats, if there were any. Of course, Detective. What about security for my wife? I've made arrangements with the county sheriff. A patrol car will be stationed outside your house 24 hours a day. Also, don't tell anyone about the letter. If the killer finds out you went to the police, it could make things worse. After I finished talking, I reread the letter one more time. The postmark, the paper, the font, everything pointed to Chicago. But my gut told me it wasn't that simple. The solution came out of the blue. I called the Billings post office and asked to speak to the supervisor. I needed to know if it was possible to mail a letter from Montana with a Chicago postmark. It is theoretically possible, the supervisor replied, if you send the letter by express mail through the intermediate office in Chicago, but that would be expensive and take time. This information made me look at the case in a new way. What if the letter was not sent from Chicago, but purposely through Chicago to create a false trail? I picked up a map and measured the distance from Billings to Chicago. About 1,000 miles, about 15 hours by car. If someone left Montana on the morning of the 26th, he could have mailed a letter from Chicago that evening. But why would Henry Rodriguez want to go to Chicago? He had no money for such a trip, and he had given an alibi for being in the dormitory. What if someone other than Henry sent the letter? Someone who knew about Robert Simmons's business problems and decided to use them to misdirect the investigation. I looked at my watch. It was too late to continue the investigation. But tomorrow I planned to scrutinize Henry Rodriguez's alibi again and talk to other people who might have known about Robert Simmons' Chicago business. So far, I had two possible leads: a professional murder ordered by a Chicago competitor or a carefully planned revenge on Henry Rodriguez in an attempt to direct suspicion toward the victim's business enemies. Tomorrow, it would be clear which version was closer to the truth. On October 29th, I awoke with the firm intention of sorting out Henry Rodriguez's alibi once and for all. Something in his testimony was bothering me, and I decided to check every little detail of his supposedly harmless evening in the dormitory. The first thing I did was to go to the university and request the logs of the dormitory's computer network for the night of October 26th to 27th. The system administrator, a young guy named Kevin, readily provided me with all the information. "Here's the computer activity from room 314, he said, showing me the data on the screen. Henry Rodriguez was indeed online in the game until 3 in the morning. But there's a catch. What was it? The game client was running, but activity was minimal after 11 p.m. His character was just standing in one place. Technically, he could have launched the game and left. That was the first crack in Henry's alibi. I asked Kevin to print out the detailed logs and went to the security footage. This time I decided to check not only the main entrances to the dorm, but also the back door leading to the utility rooms. Officer Davis was helping me review the footage. We scrutinized the footage from 11 p.m. to 3 in the morning. "Stop," I said, noticing movement on the screen. "Go back." At 11:47 p.m., the camera at the back entrance captured a figure in a dark hooded jacket leaving the building. No face was visible, but the gait and build resembled Henry's. "Is there anything else?" I asked. We continued browsing. At 1:23 in the morning, the same figure was returning the same way. Again, no face was visible, but his hands were gloved and his gait showed nervousness. "We need witness statements," I said to Davis. "We'll talk to Henry's dorm roommates." The first one we interviewed was a student in room 312, James Wilson. He was an engineering major, quiet and observant. "Henry?" "Yeah, I know him pretty well," James said. "That night, yeah, he was weird. Around 11 o'clock, I heard him fumbling around in the hallway, looking for something. And then I heard the back door slam." "Are you sure it was him?" "Pretty sure." I looked out into the hallway and saw someone in a dark jacket walking toward the stairs. He was Henry's exact height and build. The next witness was a student from the first floor, Michelle Jones. Her room was next to the back door. "That night I was woken up by a noise," she said. Someone was opening and closing the door very quietly, first around midnight, then closer to morning. I thought maybe someone was going out for a smoke. "Did you see this person?" "No, but I heard footsteps. Quick, nervous, like someone was in a hurry." By noon, I had enough evidence to doubt Henry's alibi. Cameras showed a suspicious figure, computer logs indicated no activity, and witnesses confirmed that someone had left the dormitory during the night. but I needed more hard evidence. I returned to the crime scene and once again scrutinized the ditch and surrounding area. The forensics team might have missed something important. Looking through the bushes near the ditch, I came across a shiny object covered in leaves. It was a chain-a-thin silver chain with a small pendant in the shape of the university logo. They were sold in the university store, and many students wore them. I carefully gathered the chain into an evidence bag and drove to the lab. Forensic scientist Johnson immediately analyzed it. "There are traces of DNA on the chain," he reported 2 hours later, "and partial fingerprints. Give me until tomorrow and I can identify them." While the lab worked on the chain, I decided to talk to other students who knew both Henry and Carly. Perhaps someone had seen Henry that night or knew additional details about their relationship. In the university cafeteria, I met Marcus Brown, a fourth-year student who had witnessed the incident between Henry and Carly. "It was horrible," he recounted. "Henry was so sincere in his declaration of love for her, and she just stomped on him. Said he wasn't worthy of sweeping her driveway, that she didn't notice losers like him." How did Henry react? He stood there like a statue, red with shame. And then when everyone started laughing, his face changed. I've never seen such hatred in a man's eyes. He clenched his fists and walked away without saying a word. Did anyone talk to him after this incident? I met him outside the dormitory in the evening of the same day. He looked depressed, mumbling something about how everything would be fair, that she would pay for her humiliation. The words sounded like a threat. "All will be fair" is a pretty ominous phrase for an offended guy. The next morning, October 30th, Johnson called with the results of the chain of custody analysis. "Detective King, the DNA and prints on the chain belong to Henry Rodriguez. No doubt about it. That's the final nail in the coffin of Henry's alibi. I had cameras, witnesses, computer logs, and now physical evidence linking him to the crime scene. I put together an arrest team, Davis, Thompson, and me. We drove to the dorms around 2 in the afternoon, when most students were in classes or on campus. Walking up to the 3rd floor, I felt a mixture of relief and frustration. Relief that the case was nearing completion, and disappointment that a young man had ruined his life over a moment of anger. I knocked on the door of room 314. Henry opened, looking even worse than when we first met. His eyes were red from lack of sleep, his clothes crumpled. "Henry Rodriguez, you're under arrest for the murder of Carly Simmons." Henry's face turned white, but he didn't resist as Davis handcuffed him. Students gathered in the hallway, attracted by the unfamiliar noise. Whispers and surprised looks accompanied us to the elevator. At the station, I put Henry in the interrogation room and laid out all the evidence in front of him: surveillance photos, witness statements, computer logs, a picture of the chain. "Henry, your necklace was found next to Carly's body. Cameras saw you leaving the dorm the night of the murder. Witnesses heard your footsteps. Computer logs show no gambling after 11 p.m. Anything you want to say?" Henry was silent for a long time, looking at the photographs. His hands were trembling. "I didn't mean to kill her," he said quietly. "I just wanted to talk to her, to explain that I wasn't the loser she thought I was. Tell me what happened that night." Henry leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes. After the incident in the cafeteria, I spent all day thinking about what she said. Everyone laughed at me, pointed fingers in the hallways. My friends avoided me. I felt destroyed. "So what did you decide to do?" "I wanted to talk to her alone, explain that I'm not a loser, that I had plans, that I would succeed. I knew she often came home late from the library, so I decided to wait for her outside the dorm." "Where exactly? By the ditch? In the bushes?" "I thought that when she walked down the path, I would come out and ask her to listen to me." Henry opened his eyes and looked at me. There was anguish and remorse in his gaze. "She came in about 11 o'clock. When I came out of the bushes, she freaked out, started screaming, said she was going to call security. I tried to explain that I just wanted to talk, but she started humiliating me again." "What exactly did she say?" "That I was a psychopath, that I was stalking her, that perverts like me should be expelled from the university, that I was a disgusting loser, and if I ever came near her again, she'd go to the police." Henry clenched his fists, remembering that conversation. I'd lost control. I had a tire iron in my hand, which I'd taken from the dorm's maintenance room in case I needed to defend myself. When she said I was disgusting, I just hit her. How many times? I don't know. I don't remember. I woke up when she wasn't moving. There was so much blood. I panicked. Why did you take so many blows after she was dead? Henry was crying. I couldn't stop. All the humiliation, all the pain, it all mixed up in my head. I imagined everyone laughing at me, and I kept hitting. And the letter? The letter her father had gotten? Henry looked at me in surprise. How do you know about the letter? Mr. Simmons showed it to me. A threatening letter from Chicago. Henry grinned bitterly. Yes, that was my plan. After the murder, I realized I needed to draw suspicion away from myself. I knew about Carly's father's business. She sometimes mentioned that Dad was expanding in Chicago, that he was having trouble with competitors there. How did you send the letter from Chicago? I have a friend, Tommy, who goes to the University of Chicago. I wrote a letter, emailed it to him, asked him to print it out and mail it from the address listed. Said it was a prank for a friend. So you were planning to accuse Carly's father's competitors? Yeah, I thought the police would buy that story, that the businessman's daughter was killed by her father's enemies. I hoped the investigation would go that way and not look for a student killer. I wrote down every word of Henry's confession. The whole picture of the crime became clear. Humiliation, revenge, an attempt to cover his tracks and deceive justice. Henry, do you realize the seriousness of your actions? You killed a man and tried to misdirect the investigation. I do. I haven't slept in days thinking about this. Every time I close my eyes, I see her face. I didn't mean to kill her, I swear. But you did. And then you made a plan in cold blood to get away with it. Henry nodded, tears streaming down his face. I knew I'd be caught eventually, but I was hoping to buy time, maybe escape. I'd ruined my whole life because of a few words from that girl. After Henry signed the confession, I called the DA to draw up the charges. First-degree murder, attempted obstruction of justice, sending false threats. Henry Rodriguez was facing a long prison sentence, possibly life in prison. As I left the interrogation room, I thought about how easily pride can turn into deadly hatred. Henry was an ordinary student, perhaps a little shy and insecure, but a few cruel words in public had turned him into a killer. I was to call Robert Simmons and tell him that his daughter's killer had been found, that the threats to his family came not from a Chicago competitor, but from a resentful student who tried to defraud justice. And Henry Rodriguez will spend the rest of his life in prison, reflecting on how a few minutes of anger destroyed 2 lives, his own and Carly Simmons.